Hello everyone and welcome to the Improving Scottish Football podcast. My name is Kieran and today we've got a great episode for you with Jamie Swinney, who is the CEO of Falkirk FC. And of course I'm also joined by regular contributor, coach and analyst John Walker. So today we are going to be talking about what life is like in the Championship, arguably the most competitive league in the UK, or certainly it often is. And we'll also go on to talk about the governance of Scottish football and how SPFL articles potentially prevent change and evolution. So, as ever, please do like, share and subscribe and review and all that good stuff. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So, Jamie, a very warm welcome to the pod. Can we start out by you giving us a quick introduction to yourself for those who don't know you?
Yeah, of course. Kieran, thank you for the invite. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on and talk about Scottish football, something that it's been a big part of my life and something that not only do I work in, but something that's a passion to me. So thanks for the invite. Yeah, I'm Chief Executive of Falkirk Football Club, have been for 3.5 years now. That was, prior to that, I was 3.5 years as the Chief Executive at Stenhouse Football Club. And I've spent the last 15 to 17 years really in sports leadership roles, football leadership roles in a variety of settings, community football, community sport, academy football, and did all the coaching as well, coached for 16 years. And then hopefully the listeners enjoy our conversation. Hopefully we can debate and what's the good things about Scottish football and things that can make it better and discuss all things Falkirk as well.
Good stuff. Yeah, so Falkirk have had quite a journey, let's say, over the last few years. Having spent 5 years, to be fair, I didn't quite realise it was 5 years. I had to look it up. It sounds ridiculous that Falkirk spent 5 years in League One, but then obviously going unbeaten last season and currently sitting top of the Championship. What's that kind of journey been like? I appreciate you haven't been there the entire time, but that is quite a big rise from where you were a couple of years ago.
Yeah, so I think you've hit the nail on the head. I mean, Falkirk Football Club should never find itself in League One for that period of time, and that's not in any kind of way arrogant. It's simply that the football club is a club that's more than capable of being in the top division, and certainly most of its history has been top division or the second tier. So 5 years in League One is unacceptable for the football club. And when I first joined, it was we'd started our third year in League One at that point in time, and my first year in the club was the worst year in the club's entire history. So not the best. Well, in some ways maybe a good year to start because there was an opportunity to improve upon it, but certainly one of the most difficult and challenging 9 months of my life, where we finished sixth in League One and lost 1.2 million. So we were at that point arguably the worst run club in Scottish football that had led to that point. You know, you don't end up there by chance. You end up there because you've consistently made bad decisions. The fan base is up there with outside the top six. It's one of the biggest fan bases in Scottish football. So to get to the point where you're in the middle of League One, I mean, not even competing to win it, but finishing sixth in League One, that's gross. You know, that's gross mismanagement over a number of years. So a lot of work was required. When I first started, I talked about a full club rebuild because we needed to start again. Every single part of the football club was underperforming. We needed to essentially pick it up off the canvas and actually give it a new lease of life in every single way. So that was a huge journey. That really took up until the summer there. So that took the best part of another 2 years to take us from where we were to then an incredible season last year, and the first club outside Celtic and Rangers to have an unbeaten season over a proper 30 plus game season. That's a remarkable achievement, and it might never be seen again. So to go from where we were to that was amazing for everybody connected to the football club, and we've obviously had a very, very good first 6 months in the Championship. And we're hoping to carry that on for the next 4 months and hopefully go and secure promotion to the Premiership.
Yeah. And John, what's been your impression? And if you could also give us a little bit of chat about their playing style, what's impressed you about them?
Yeah, even before the playing style, I think the touching on the £1.2 million loss and the rebuild, what was the first port of call? Like when you're looking at that rebuild and you're already seeing losses, how do you go about even getting Falkirk in a position where they're financially more stable, never mind competing for League One?
Yeah, so you don't turn a £1.2 million loss into a profit within a year, that's for sure. So we started the following year knowing that the only way to maintain full-time football was actually to run at a significant operating loss again. So we were forecasting about a 450k operating loss at the start of the following year. But the only other alternative to that was to go part-time. So we brought John McGlynn and Paul Smith in, and we wanted to back them. And that meant we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to significantly increase every single income line, but also to manage costs the best we can, and to raise share issues. So essentially to sell shares to get to a point where we could maintain a full-time football club. And to be honest with you, we were still going to fall short. We reached the Scottish Cup semi-final that season, and that money essentially allowed us to get to the end of the season and to go into last season with a full-time budget. Without that Scottish Cup semi-final, the football club would quite probably have had to go part-time. There wouldn't have been an alternative, because you can't strip out several £100,000 of cost without having a huge impact on the football budget. So that is how close it was for this football club after 4 and 5 years in League One. That was how close it was to going to a position of part-time football, which again is unthinkable for a club like Falkirk. But that was a very, very much a reality up until securing promotion last season.
I think anyone that's maybe heard John McGlynn on Open Goal and talking about his philosophy and how he likes to play, see when you're going about then trying to appoint the candidate, have you already got in mind that John McGlynn's the one you want in for that specific reason? Or was there an interview process, and what is your interview process for the managerial? Because I think that's something that is maybe the missing part of Scottish football that a lot of us don't actually get to see the detail of.
Yeah, so I think every club probably approach it differently. I would say, unfortunately, had to go through this on 4 or 5 occasions now. 3 times at Stennismuir and twice at Falkirk. And I say unfortunately because sacking a manager is really, really hard. It's actually a horrible thing to do. And I remember the first time at Stennismuir, we parted company with a guy called Brian Ferguson, who's actually back as assistant manager at Stennismuir, and he's genuinely one of the best guys in football, like an unbelievable guy. And that, I remember how difficult that was being involved in that process, because you build up a relationship with them. So, as I say, unfortunately, I've now been through that process 5 times in terms of appointing a new manager. Every single time it's been slightly different. In terms of, there was a time at Stennismuir where it was about we are in a pretty negative place. We need somebody who we know, that we can trust, that can start immediately, who's a safe pair of hands. And we appointed Davy Irons because I had a really good relationship with the club. So every single situation has been a little bit different. For regards to John and Paul, after being through this process 4 times previously, I was working with a board who at that point had never been through that process of appointing a manager. So my recommendation was, the one thing I think football clubs do that I think is an error is they immediately start talking names. So, you're looking for a manager, people just start throwing names in, like the bookies do, like papers do essentially, right? But in no other business would you ever do that. In no other business would you be looking to appoint somebody and just open the floor and say, right, who's out there? You would never do that. So I said to the board, let's drop a person spec, keep it really, really tight, 3, 4 or 5 key characteristics, decide on what we want, make sure that we're very clear on what we want, and then I will produce a list off the back of that. So we had 5 key characteristics, and I came back to the board and I said, John McGlynn. And they asked for other names, and I said, he's the only one that meets all 5 characteristics, and therefore my recommendation is we go for John McGlynn. And I'm absolutely delighted that they agreed with me, and delighted that we're sitting here where we are, and that John and Paul have been a huge part of the turnaround at the football club. So that was our process for this recruitment of John and Paul. But I would suggest that football clubs have got shall we say at times probably, a very unorthodox way of recruiting people. And my experience of being through it tells me that go make sure you're very clear on what you're doing and follow a proper process. I've been at Stennismuir in the past, as I say, when we've had 3 different interviews. We've actually done 3-stage interviews to try and get to a manager. So I've been through various different processes, but football clubs should always try their best, I think, to follow processes.
Do you think those characteristics have changed now? That I don't know. Did you know what you were getting with John McGlynn is in regards to the style of play? Because I think anyone that has watched Falkirk now has been uber impressed. I've seen them up close quite a few times now, and I know I've heard them talk about the influence of Brendan Rodgers and the style that he likes to play. I think that's anyone who watches them can see that's exactly what it is. Was that something you realised you were getting, or is that kind of taking you a little bit even more by surprise that you now kind of have that?
That was very clear on that one. That was actually one of the 5 characteristics. Was that Falkirk fans have over the years seen a very progressive style of football. We've had some really, really forward attacking, expansive football teams in the past, and it was really important that we have that as part of our identity. And I remember sitting watching Raith Rovers a few seasons ago when John and Paul had them in the Championship for the first time, and I remember watching a few games and just being really impressed by them. Really, really impressed by the style of play. It was really clear and evident to me there was a clear pattern of play, a style, an ethos, and a real focus on being an attacking, expansive football team. So, having watched them over a few seasons, I was very confident they would bring that to Falkirk. Very confident, and I'm thrilled to say that they have. Some of the football that we've seen this season has been really, really incredible to watch and so enjoyable. So we have managed to produce a style that Falkirk fans not only enjoy but can relate to, going back to previous clubs and teams over the years.
And just to kind of expand this a little bit to life in the Championship in general, obviously we know it's an incredibly competitive league. There's a lot of big teams in there. And there's also this bottleneck going up to the Premiership. Is that something you would like to see changed? And how do you feel life is like for you guys in the Championship, albeit you've only been there 1 season?
I think the Championship's an excellent league. You mentioned it earlier on, Kieran. I think it's an excellent league. I think it's highly competitive. I don't think it's healthy for the game that there's such a disparity in income from the Premiership to Championship. I don't think that's healthy for the game. There's not a lot of money in Scottish football as it is, and actually, you see in the Championship, it's actually very difficult to break even. Just even break even in the Championship. That's why we see a lot of situations of clubs posting significant losses, because you are working off a very small income. Even with like ourselves, where you have a fantastic fan base, it's still a relatively modest income, and that gap's getting wider. So for every new £1 million that comes into Scottish football, 84% goes to the Premiership. So every single time and it does every year, the SPFL pot increases every year because there's improved commercial terms. So that's a real positive for the game. But the only clubs that actually feel that really are the top 12. By the time you trickle down to 11% for the Championship and 6.5% between League One and League Two, it's such a small amount of money that even the part-time clubs don't really see a difference from an extra £1 million coming into the game, and I think that's wrong. I really think that's wrong. So it's positive more money's coming in, but I do think that there's far too big a gap between the Championship and Premiership. And I think when you see the playoffs every year, they should be really exciting, and I think they are to an extent. But I think you do see the golf quite often come through in the playoffs, and quite often the Championship side, by the time they get to the final, they're out on their feet. And unfortunately, Falkirk's been there, Inverness have been there, Raith Rovers have been there. You end up, really struggling in the final. And I don't think that's the way those playoffs should really work. I think it should be a bit more of a kind of a fairer and more equitable measurement of the two teams. I don't think that quite does it.
Yeah, I think Kieran and I agree wholeheartedly on this. It's almost ludicrous that a team battles, that the team above you battles all year, and in my mind, if they finish in the position they finish in, they've failed. They don't get to have a freebie against a team who's had a positive season and had to play for the playoffs in those teams in those divisions. And as you said, they're running in tired. Those teams probably already know whether they're kind of surviving to those last 6 games in the split of the SPFL to try and get their points up. So yeah, I think we're all for league reconstruction, or at least fixing that playoff situation.
Yeah, and I'll obviously jump on this bandwagon as well, because I believe exactly the same things. The fact that there isn't such a free flow between the Premiership and Championship is not only harsh on obviously the Championship clubs that finish in the playoff position, but also what you end up doing is the Premiership clubs know that if they fall into the Championship, it is so difficult to get out of it unless you finish first. And that is why you see such an emphasis on just playing safe football the way we've always done it, playing the same experienced players, maybe not taking a chance on youth.
Kieran, I think on that, when you look at that, that's a really key point about what it means to a club dropping out. So the last three clubs that have dropped out of the champion, that won the championships, the last three clubs, Kilmarnock, then Dundee, then Dundee, they've posted an average operating loss in that championship year of 2.5 million. An average operating loss, those three clubs, of 2.5 million. That's really, really not healthy. That's really not healthy. Now, they've all managed to get back up, and they've got different models as well in terms of different ownership structures, the three of them. However, that's not healthy that you are so reliant on being in the Scottish Premiership that you have to lose the best part of £3 million to get back up again. Now, we're actually, we started the season with a break-even budget. So we're trying to do something that is absolutely at the opposite end of what's been done the last 3 years. We're trying to win a league with a break-even budget when the last three clubs that have won it have lost on average 2.5 million. So it just shows you the context of how difficult it is if you're not in the top 12 to get in the top 12, and how it is becoming more and more of a closed shop, unfortunately.
So even if we have a scenario in which Falkirk go up, I mean, I think this season's maybe what you're talking about, the possibility of being able to do that with break-even budgets, because the team that got relegated last year from the SPFL Premier League is probably the most modestly run team that were in that league for a long time and haven't done what you've referred to as Dundee United, Kilmarnock doing, and just throwing money at the problem to make sure they get back in. If Falkirk got that scaled up to what they would go to, how they would expand their budget, and what sort of recruitment do Falkirk then look at? Because I think the shining recruitment that I'll call out is the one of Kieran Adams. I think he's the poster boy for the pyramid that I keep talking about. There's so many, and I know John McGlynn's probably youth ability to develop players and bring people on. I think that's the missing bit that I sometimes see clubs not do well, as you're talking about Dundee United and Kilmarnock throwing money at it. They'll throw money at experienced players to make sure they get out of the division. But there's definitely academy players that are dropping down divisions that if you scout properly, recruit properly, you can get a break-even promotion from the Championship. Is that then scaled up already if you get into the Premier League?
Yeah, so we are working on, as we have to do. This goes back to is how healthy is it to have such small leagues and play each other 4 times. But we've got to run more than one budget every single year. So planning ahead is so difficult because you can't just plan for one scenario. So we right now have to plan for both the Premiership and the Championship. But you're signing players up in contracts. You're making commitments longer term on the basis of you don't know what league you're in, and you might not know what league you're in until the end of May. So we are planning ahead. Yeah, we are trying our best to budget and to scale up what that would look like for Falkirk. But it is very, very challenging. That is extremely challenging. In terms of recruitment, John and Paul have done phenomenal. The recruitment success rate is way beyond what would be deemed to be normal or even good. It's probably 90% success rate for recruitment, which is just unheard of. Going to this Premiership does create other challenges for us, because we right now won't be paying players anywhere near what similar sized clubs in the Premiership are. So we need to try and find a way of bridging that gap to not only bring others in, but to bring some level of experience in the Premiership into the squad, and that won't be easy. There's no doubt about it. We've not been in the Premiership for 15 years as a football club, so there's very few people left in the building who were part of the football club the last time we were a Premiership club. So there'll be a steep learning curve for myself as well, I would add.
One of the things you talked about there about the constant budget, what other things as a chief executive actually has to go on and be fluid? Because obviously if a Premier League manager was to be sacked in the next week, John McGlynn would be high on the radar of those candidates. similar to budget, do you compile a list of potential managers and the off chance? Obviously, you've said you've went through the sacking part. I don't think that's going to be a problem where John McGlynn's referred to just now. Do you keep a list of maybe potential people that you'd like to keep an eye on, that if John McGlynn gets promoted to someone else, that you would go to, the same way that if players get snapped up? I mean, I would think Kieran Adams would be somebody that'll attract a lot of interest in the summer, because he just seems to go up levels every time he plays. It just seems to get better and better. Are you constantly keeping those? If we sell player X, we could look at 3 players here. If we lose a manager, we've got these candidates, because we know now exactly what we want in our manager.
Yeah, certainly from a playing point of view, John and Paul are very, very good. They know every player in Scottish football, every single player. Now, what we need to do over time is expand a little bit beyond Scottish football, because if we go to the Premiership, we will need to look, I say further afield. I'm probably mostly just referring to the rest of the UK more than abroad. But clearly, if at the moment we're cast our net over Scotland, that net probably has to be a little bit bigger for the Premiership. That's one thing that I think will have to change, and we are starting to look at building that recruitment team beyond what it currently exists. So that's one thing. With regards to management, and I think I would just say staff in general across the club, succession planning. Any good business has to have that in there. So that goes for John and Paul, it goes for myself, it goes for every role within the football club. You have to always be thinking about people that can either move up the way in the business, in the football club, or if need be, you need to think about how you would recruit in a situation that you found yourself in. So I would suggest that we would not be doing our job very well if we didn't have plans in place for when people move on, and hopefully John and Paul are with us for a number of years to come. But you're right, the job they've done, the reputation they have in Scottish football, it wouldn't surprise you if they have offers at some point in the future to go either to a Premiership club, especially if we're not in the Premiership, or to a bigger club. There's certain clubs obviously in Scottish football that are just simply bigger than Falkirk, and the opportunities may well come around. But certainly for the time being, we're delighted to have them.
And then in terms of your kind of ambitions for the future, obviously, ideal scenario, you're preparing for a Premiership return. But reading on the kind of AGM notes, you were talking about things like training ground, a 4th stand, player development. Do you mind just talking a little bit about ideally where you would like to get to as a club?
Yeah, so we go back to where we were 3 years ago. It was really difficult to talk about the future, to be honest. It was really difficult. We were so week to week and month to month, literally survival was all that mattered. Trying to make sure the football club was still in existence was actually all that mattered. And we were really, really close at one point. We were really struggling at one point to get our accounts signed off. That's how close we were to having potentially going down the road that some other clubs have been down in terms of administration. We weren't a million miles away from that. So that was difficult at that point to talk about a future. Where I felt we got to in the summer was an opportunity to start to talk about the future, and we are progressing at the moment a 5-year plan. It's difficult in football for the reasons I just mentioned about not knowing what league you're in, but that 5-year plan, I said to the shareholders at the last AGM, after presenting to the board as well, that it's an opportunity now to be ambitious. We've had a really difficult period. Now's the time to talk about the future. So that future for me involves, it's easy to say trying to get to the Premiership, but that's an obvious goal. Of course, we've got that ambition, but it goes a bit beyond that. It's about creating a sustainable football club that, as I say, we've got a break-even model. We've managed to be successful so far this season with a break-even model, so that's important. Fan ownership, we've been the very best fan-owned club in Scotland. Trying to be the very best we can. There's other good clubs out there that have went down the fan ownership route. We want to be the very best we can. It's about looking at that youth development pathway again, and can we get our academy at some point back to the level it was, which was one of the best performing academies in Scotland at one point. And as part of that, there's infrastructure development required. We're going to have to, if we go to the Premiership, rip up a perfectly good artificial pitch and put down a grass pitch. That's a £1.2 million cost. So that's not something that is easily achievable. The direct result of that is a training ground is then required. So there's investment required there. And we've been 20 years in the stadium and we've still not got a 4th stand. So I really, really want to deliver that, but also want to be more ambitious in that. And I don't see why we as a football club shouldn't have an ambition to go and play in Europe. You know, I've been in the stand watching Falkirk play in Europe once before. I would love to be there again as chief executive and actually see us playing in Europe. So the ambition's got to start for me and the board. But I think most of the fans would share those ambitions. And I think we're in a position where we can achieve that. We can achieve all of those things over the next 3 to 5 years, and that's where I hope to be able to be in 5 years' time.
Plastic pitches. I take it you're obviously not in favour of the recent vote that went through to kind of rip up all the plastic pitches. Give us your kind of argument in terms of why plastic pitches should be allowed in the top flight.
So I might surprise you a little bit here. I'm not necessarily going to say the argument is that they should be. What I think is wrong is the process for arriving at a vote to ban them. So in an ideal world, I think every club in the top league should have a top quality grass pitch. That's for me what an ideal world would look like. I look around in Scottish football, I've watched Scottish football my whole life. That's not reality. We do not have 12 pristine grass pitches in the Scottish Premiership. We never have, and I don't think we ever will. And the reasons are climate, number one. We are a very wet country, and in case people haven't paid attention, it's getting wetter, unfortunately, due to global warming. So we've got a wet country that's sort of getting wetter. To get to the Premiership level of grass pitches, English Premiership level of grass pitches, you are spending 7 figures on your pitch alone. So with heat lamps and you know the irrigation, so everything about it is a top quality. That's millions of pounds to get those pitches to that level. Apart from Celtic and Rangers, who in Scottish football can afford to spend that money on their pitch? I think even Hearts and Hibs and Aberdeen, that's a struggle to reach that level. So it's very, very difficult for smaller clubs to achieve it. So I think there's a debate there. What I would suggest is the disappointing for me is if you park your feelings towards artificial or grass at this moment in time, the decision was made without any due process. So there was no research carried out, there was no data. We don't have, at this moment in time, we don't have a criteria for grass pitches. So we're banning artificial before we actually know what a good grass pitch looks like and have a set criteria for a good grass pitch. That's wrong. That's fundamentally wrong. We've based a decision, I say we, the Premiership clubs, have based a decision on ultimately 2 pitches that were at the end of their lifespan and 2 pitches that were maybe not the best artificial pitches that you'll find. Our pitch is absolutely light years ahead, and I don't mean this in the least disrespectful way, of Livingston's and Kilmarnock's. It's a UEFA Champions League standard pitch that we maintain very, very well. So what our proposal was, and I say myself, it wasn't just ours. I led a group of 6 clubs where we proposed an alternative to the Premiership clubs and to the SPFL, and that was spend the next 2 years doing the research to understand what a really good grass pitch looks like and what's the cost implications of that. Use the 2 years to test the AstroTurf pitches, so test our pitch, test Airdrie's pitch, which is also very, very good, test Queen of the South's pitch, which is also very good, but also test the older artificial pitches. And what you will find is the highest quality artificial pitch in its first 3, 4, 5 years performs very well. It then starts to decline over time. So use it to research that. Then what you then do after 2 years is you then come to an informed decision, and you look at the impact on clubs and you make an informed decision that actually can mitigate against the challenges. So what we've now done is clubs have forced through a vote without any due process, with no due diligence and no consideration for the impact on Scottish football. We're going to have situations in the coming years where a club is maybe in the playoffs of the Premiership to the Championship playoffs, Championship to the Premiership playoffs. They have an artificial pitch. They don't know until the end of August whether they're going to be, so the end of May, whether they're going to be a Premiership club. They're then going to be forced to spend £1.2 million just to be allowed to enter the Premiership, despite having played 36 games and then won a playoff, forced to spend £1.2 million to be given the opportunity to be in the Premiership. And they'll have to have that pitch down by August time, essentially. For me, and at this moment in time, there is no support forthcoming. So clubs who have spent hundreds of thousands of pounds on artificial pitches then have to spend another £1.2 million on a grass pitch. to be allowed entry into the Scottish Premiership. That's fundamentally wrong. It's not the way the game should be governed. Regardless of your views on artificial pitch or grass pitches, I think every reasonable-minded supporter would say that's not how Scottish football should be governed. We should be much, much better than that. So I'll go back to the very start. My argument is not actually that we should have artificial pitches in the Premiership forever. It's that we should have made sure we did a proper process, and at the end of that process, whatever the outcome was, we should have made sure that the clubs, that there was factors that could mitigate against the challenges that clubs would face, and that it was done in a fair way and a measured way. And unfortunately, none of that exists in the current vote.
And I think that's a very good point you raise, and I think it's actually something that I think people get really frustrated by with the artificial pitches, just the quality you referred to, because all of us consistently play on artificial pitches. Most of our games of sevens will be on artificial pitches if you play amateur football. And I think that's one of the frustrations when we've watched like Kilmarnock v Rangers or Celtic and Livingston v Rangers or Celtic. And then you go and play on Broadwood's AstroTurf, which was relayed 2 years ago. And you go, how is the bobble so bad at Livingston and Kilmarnock when this pitch plays perfectly? And it is just that it's one that's coming to the end of the life cycle. And this, what you're talking about having to fork out costs to change to a grass pitch, is the exact same farce that we had 20 odd years ago when they were forcing clubs to build 10,000 all-seater stadiums if they wanted access to the SPFL. And look how well that's worked out.
That's a really good point, John. I mean, that is ultimately exactly what this is again. So back then it was the SPL and the SFL. So essentially it was two different organisations. We're all part of the SPFL now. So this was supposed to be a unified Scottish football, and actually the behaviours are exactly the same as they were in the old SPL days. And one thing I forgot to mention is, as part of our alternate option, and that what we suggested was what we would commit to for the time being until we got to a long-term decision on artificial pitches. We would commit to that every 4 years in the Premiership you must renew your artificial pitch. So if we come up, if our pitch is within 4 years, we can use it. But if it gets to year 4 and we're still in the Premiership, we have to rip up and start again and put a brand new one down again. We also talked about following the same guidelines as the UEFA Champions League have for UEFA for artificial pitches, which is limiting the use on them, so that the use is limited to the first team only, and that again would have maintained the high quality. So a sense of what we were saying is the only pitches that would have been permitted in the Scottish Premiership would have been UEFA Champions League standard artificial pitches, which would be replaced every 4 years. For me, that was a very, very reasonable, well thought out, and it was a very detailed paper that the 6 clubs pulled together, and that would have been a sensible middle ground, because it would have removed the issues that you see in Livingston and Kilmarnock. Those pitches wouldn't have been permitted in that scenario. It would have had to have been Falkirk's pitch and that level to allow you to be in the Premiership. So it's very, very frustrating and disappointing, but it is almost identical to the 10,000 seater rule.
And presumably to follow the Champions League model, even at that, if that had been approved, you guys would already be foregoing a lot of income based on limiting the use of the pitch.
This is one of these probably very false narratives about artificial pitches, that you make lots and lots of money on them. If you're like us, we actually, majority of our use is our own academy and our own foundation. So we don't sell them commercially and make hundreds of thousands of pounds. So I think there's another part of this that some of the Premiership clubs potentially think, but they're getting an advantage because they've got an extra income. It's a very, very nominal income that you generate off artificial pitches. And actually the benefit is you get young people running around on a Saturday morning and during the week with the steeple, with the Falkirk badge on their chest, playing inside that stadium. That's massive for fan development. That's massive for community development. So there's a huge negative as well in terms of the wider impact on the game. For example, a women's team then can't play in the stadium every week because it's a grass pitch, and so the women's team can't play, the kids teams can't play, the academy teams can't play. So there's a whole bunch of other negative outcomes of this as well. And as I say, we don't make hundreds of thousands of pounds off our pitch, so there wouldn't be a massive drop in income from our point of view. It's more the fact that we've got a business model that works, and it actually works really well for us.
You mentioned that due process wasn't carried out. Is this something that you see quite often when it comes to decisions being made within the SPFL, how often is the process done in the right way? And is there change needed in the way that the SPFL kind of conducts its business and gets its votes from its members, etc.?
Yeah, so I'll try and answer that in two parts. So this vote actually is a very unique vote. So actually, what should happen in a situation like this for a vote that actually changes articles? Because there actually was a change in articles to ban artificial pitches. So what normally happens goes to a 42 club vote. I think most people know that the voting process starts at the Premiership, and that if the Premiership don't vote it through, it doesn't even go down below the Premiership. So when we talk about things like league reconstruction, redistribution of funds, this is why you will never see those things happen, or it's very unlikely to, because if the Premiership don't want it, then it doesn't matter what the Championship, League One and League Two think, because the voting doesn't actually go down to the levels. This vote was actually maybe the first time it's ever happened. There's a clause in the articles which allows the SPFL chairman to essentially put the vote only to the Premiership clubs, or only to one club, one league to vote on, if it's deemed to be a one league issue. So if it's deemed to only impact one league, then one league can vote on it. So this is the part that I think is really wrong, to be honest with you. To deem it to only be a one league issue when you've got promotion and relegation every single season is fundamentally wrong. Fundamentally wrong. So this actually allowed them to bypass the Championship in League One and League Two, which, again, governance, going back to, is this how we really want to govern the game? That's not right, in my opinion. That is not right. If the Championship clubs decided, well, we're going to put a rule in that says you have to be a full-time club to be in the Championship, should we be allowed to vote on that and stop part-time clubs from progressing into the Championship because it's a league vote? For me, that's just wrong. And that's essentially what's happened. It's a one league vote that actually impacts a lot more than the one league. So this particular issue is a very unique situation. It's probably the first time it's ever been used, and it makes the decision even harder to accept because it's been pushed through in that way. With regards to the wider discussion, I don't think that you're ever going to get the change that a lot of people would like to see, because when you've got an 11-to-1 voting system for the majority of key decisions, you are not likely to see those decisions being made necessarily to allow for change and allow for evolution and allow for development. So unfortunately, what we have and what all the clubs voted for all those years ago is a system that essentially prevents development, it prevents change, it prevents progression, which is why the minute you talk about league reconstruction, it's almost a waste of time, unfortunately.
Is there any prospect of that 11-to-1 voting system for the major changes ever coming up for discussion again? And if not, how do you, as someone who believes that Scottish football needs to progress and at least discuss progressive ideas, how do you bring those to the table and try and get those changes made?
That may sound very defeatist, but I'm unsure as to if there is a route to change it. I don't think that route exists. The only way I could ever see significant change, as you say, league reconstruction, it would have to start at the very top. It would have to come from Celtic and Rangers, essentially, down the way, because all the power lies at the top end of the pyramid. So, the smaller clubs, the clubs that with the Premiership could talk all day and could have great ideas, but ultimately, if they don't want it, the top league, it won't go ahead. So sadly, I don't see that change happening. If there was a route, or if there was an opportunity to do it, then I would like to think that not just myself, but Falkirk Football Club, I would like to think that we would be a champion for change. We would like to do that. If we do get to the Premiership, we've already had this discussion. We don't want to then just become we don't want to fall into those behaviours that we've been critical of over the years with regards to 10,000 seaters and the artificial pitches. We'd like to be a voice for change, but if you're a lone voice or you're one of only a couple, you're not going to be heard anyway. So I hate to sound defeatist, but I'm not convinced that there is a route to change.
Great. Okay, well, in an ideal world, Jamie, if you could wish for anything, what would you love to see? What are the changes that you really believe would make Scottish football better? Or maybe something that's maybe slightly more achievable that wouldn't require an 11-1 vote?
I do think league reconstruction would be great. So if you're going to the utopia, what numbers? There's so many different options, and people, like to have. I've seen so many different examples of what people would like to see in Scottish football. I think bigger leagues in general is going from 4 leagues to 3 and having bigger leagues. I think would be a positive in terms of how you break those numbers down and if there's splits or not non-splits. I don't have a set preference. I would suggest I don't have this is my, this is exactly how I would do it. But I think playing each other 4 times a year is just, I think there's a boredom element kicks in. I don't think it's what fans want. The vast majority of fans, I think, would like to see a bit more variety. We played Raith in the cup there. We're playing Raith again on Sunday. That's 5 times we'll play Raith. But if you actually think about it through, you could play the same team 9 times. If you met them in the free cup competitions and you played them in the playoffs, you play 9 times in a season. I mean, it's almost laughable. So I mean this collectively. I think when Raith and Falkirk drew each other in the Scottish Cup, I think both Raith and Falkirk fans were a bit, you're playing somebody in the same league. But I think that happens when any team draws each other in the same league. I don't think the excitement's there in the cups because of that. So I like to see bigger leagues. I also think there's a very lazy argument when it comes to bigger leagues. Oh, but there'll be meaningless games. And this is one of the things you hear. There'll be meaningless games, so it'll be rubbish, and all the fans will get bored. Yeah, and you know what? There might be let's say there's a 16-team Scottish Premiership and Falkirk winning it. There could be some seasons where actually we have a few games at the end of the season where there's not an awful lot to play for. But I would argue there's always something to play for. If we were in the Premiership and Dunfermline were in the Premiership and we were sitting 11th and they were sitting 12th, we'd be making sure we try and finish above them. There would always be something. You'd always be having something where you have something to play for. But I also think that it gives Scottish young players a chance to play. I really think it's difficult for managers to play young players because they're in such a small league, and 1 or 2 wins can take you from a relegation team to a promotion, a playoff team, but like vice versa, 1 or 2 defeats can take you from looking comfortable to actually your job being on the line. That's not healthy. So this idea of smaller leagues create constant uncertainty. Well, it means football clubs can't plan ahead. It means that young players don't really get game time. And I'm not even convinced that fans would be that bothered if a few games at the end of the season were a bit more relaxed, where you actually went to the game quite relaxed about, my club's not getting relegated. I can see a few young players come on the park now. So I think there's a lazy argument about the meaningless games that would happen. So I think you'd love to see more young players in Scottish football, love to see league reconstruction, love to see a fairer distribution of funds. I really don't think it's necessary for the top league to take 84% of the SPFL income, and at this moment in time, although this might change, 100% of the UEFA Solidarity funding. So when you actually put that whole pot together, you're looking at close to 95% of the overall monies in Scottish football shared between 12 clubs. I challenge anybody that tells me that's healthy for the game. I really don't think that's healthy for the game. So I think a fairer distribution of funds is also really important and should be on the agenda. And I know it is at this moment in time with regards to UEFA Solidarity, but I think it should also be on the agenda with regards to wider distribution of funds down the levels.
Good. That is a nice wish list. John, we're coming obviously towards the end of the pod. Is there anything you want to throw out to Jamie, or do you want to respond to any of those kind of comments that Jamie's put forward?
No, not really, Kieran. I think that the league reconstruction, I think, is the one that we always bat on about. And if that we've said that before. I know I've heard a few managers say that about young players because there's so many games, so much to play for that they just can't risk their jobs, because if they play badly, the team play badly, could cost them their job. almost would like the league reconstruction just to try and test that, just to see if teams would start playing more younger players. But no, I do. I think the league reconstruction is something I think the way Belgium do it, I don't want to get into like specifics, but Belgium for me is like the one where it kind of keeps the league open after the split because they have the points. Teams meet each other twice in those areas. So if Sky are concerned, and I think it's probably money in Sky that's holding it up, is they don't want to lose 4 Old Firms on their package. And I think still having a split with a bigger league and play each other twice after the split probably helps that and keeps that alive. But I think league reconstruction is the one for me. It always will be. I'm just bored to tears of it.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure, you cited the case of like potentially playing each other 9 times. I'm pretty sure Aberdeen played Rangers. It might be going back a few seasons now, but I'm sure it was 7 times in one season because it involved both the cups and a Scottish Cup replay and stuff. And yeah.
I think as well, I think all the games become bigger, so there's Dundee and United playing each other last night in the Scottish, but if they end up in the same top 6, bottom 6, then that's the 5th, that'll be the 5th game. I think if you're only playing 2 or 3 of those derbies, or 2 or 3, I take the point on Sky and having to keep 4 Celtic Rangers. But I actually think the games become bigger. Our games against Dunfermline 4 this season, they're bigger if there's only 2. If there's 1 home and 1 away, those games become even bigger than they actually are. So again, I think there's a definite an element of, I think if you survey the majority of fans, I know it's been done in the past with the Scottish Football Fans Association, etc., that the vast majority of fans would like to see bigger leagues. I wish we listened to the supporters. We bang on about having the best support per capita in Europe, which is an unbelievable stat, and I do think Scottish football fans are the most passionate there is in Europe. I really think that you're struggling to beat our fan base in terms of overall wider Scottish football. But if that's the case, then should we not be making more decisions aligned with fans if they're so important to the game? Because on one hand, we'll talk about that and talk it up, but then we don't actually then listen to what supporters want. And one of the things they wanted forever is league reconstruction and bigger leagues. So it's really, really, on one hand, we're saying they're pivotal to the economics of Scottish football, but on the other hand, we're saying we don't really want to listen. I think that's wrong.
And I think that's the perfect place to leave the pod. That is a fantastic point, Jamie. Great. Listen, thank you so much for coming on. Really, really great to chat. And thanks for giving us that insight into everything Falkirk and Championship and beyond. Gents, thank you so much. And a big thank you to everyone who was listening.